by chance a girl in bell-bottom pants, and she likes to say,
groovy.
She came out of the blue, and in an instant I knew everything would be groovy. For her I'd climb a mountain, swim the...
Hello, Scoopsters.
Hello, fools and ghouls. I'm so sorry we had to bump our guest, Michael Vito Valentino, for today, but that's okay, because we have someone far, far superior. He is a casual fan of Scooby-Doo, or was a casual fan of Scooby-Doo as a child, never a hardcore or even medium-core fan of the series. He's a fan of media analysis first, and a fan of the series second. It's Tim Garemore.
It's Tim Garemore.
Thank you so much for coming on, Tim. We're very happy to have you. And something I like asking right off the bat is, before we even talk about and mention the name of this holy movie that we're going to be discussing, is,
of course,
why did you want to be on the podcast? You're a friend of a friend.
I am.
And what inclined you, as someone who's maybe a medium casual fan, to say, you know what, I'll talk about Scooby-Doo on a feature-length podcast?
That's an interesting question. That's a very good question. And off the bat, I do want to say thank you for having me on, because the answer is very well summarized by my introduction. I really do like media analysis, very casually. I'm as much a fan of casual media analysis as I am a casual fan of Scooby-Doo. I just like looking at something and thinking about the implications of this thing and then talking about them. And I just like talking. I just like hearing myself yammer on. That's the real answer.
And it's a good answer. And it provides me a great segue, which is, we have opinions. And I'm going to start off the bat. We are talking about Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders from 2000, the year of my birth. And right off the bat, this is my favorite Scooby-Doo movie. So everything I say will be biased from here on out by saying that.
It's a bold start. That's a bold start, Ben, but I respect it.
But just jumping in, if you want to talk about, you said you're a casual fan. Maybe you didn't see this when you were a kid, or if you did. On watching it all the way through, what were your initial things or something that stuck out to you?
Well, my first initial thoughts were varied. I'll try not to refer to my notes too often, but I do have many pages of them.
You're all good.
I believe my first impression was, I'm surprised by how funny this is. I like you, was shocked by this quality I thought it was well put together. I thought it was funny. But yeah, my first impressions were, my first impression was the jackalope. That off the bat, what's going on with that? Because this is a reoccurring thing, and we'll definitely get into this more later, because how could we not? But my first impression was, isn't this a movie about aliens? Is the jackalope going to be important? And no, of course it wasn't. It was not important at all. It was a throwaway joke that they just kept doing, but it was very well done. I thought it was very funny, and I laughed at it out loud. I lolled, and I thought that was notable.
Yeah, you lolled. I haven't heard that in a while, but I agree. And Kalle, if you could give us your first thoughts, and also I like what we did on another one, which is give a 6-second plot summary for someone who hasn't seen this film. If you can do that. First, what were your first impressions watching it through in what has been a long time?
I really, really enjoyed watching it, a lot more than some of the recent ones we've been watching. I agree with Tim. It was very funny. I think this is a really good Scooby-Doo movie, like for Scooby the character. He actually is funny. He has lines in this movie, which ones we've been watching, he barely speaks and is like barely even a part of the plot. So I liked that he was a part of it in this movie. Thought it was very entertaining. Now for my one-sentence summary of the plot. The Mystery Inc. gang goes to the desert where Scooby and Shaggy fall in love with two people, a girl and a dog. And then there's a mine, some scientists, and some aliens.
Yeah, a lot of great job. A lot of commas in that sentence, but great job. This movie, a question that I want to ask right away before we delve into each plot aspect, because it is one that we've been asking a lot on each episode. And there are two specific aspects in this movie, two little parts that made my brain just shatter, which is Scooby-Doo aware that he is a dog? And the two parts I'm referring to is, as Kaylee has mentioned on other episodes, there's a moment where Shaggy says a line and they say something about dog, and Scooby yells, "Frog, where?" Which he's done before. We've seen that. We've covered that. There's another moment, though, that struck me where Scooby talks to Crystal, who is an alien, who we know at the end is an alien.
Yeah.
Big twist.
Well, spoilers, but
We know she's not human, but she can understand him. And then we learn that, I don't know if people knew this, that only Shaggy can understand Scooby based on my inference when Shaggy is shocked that she understood what Scooby says. And then later in the movie, they make a joke about a talking dog, and Fred says something along the lines of like, yeah, if that were true. This shook me to my core. It is perplexing based on answers we've had from before, but Tim, if you want to start, do you think Scooby-Doo is aware he's a dog in this movie?
I'd love to weigh in on this personally. I do believe that your theory has some credence. I don't want to give an official statement on whether he believes it or not, because I'm not one for speculation, but I would like to agree with your point that this is a very strange, looking through that lens, it seems like he does not, because obviously there are many moments that I've seen in your show, which I have watched all episodes now, all 8 before now for context and studying. And yeah, this is a pretty convincing one, but this one is, I think, revolutionary in terms of now we have an external character confirming this. This really debunks a bunch of things that you might want to bring up if you say, oh, it's just a hallucination in his mind. Oh, it's some sort of, maybe he's high, on drugs. Maybe that's a situation. I think this really puts some credence to, no, this dog is talking. Some people can't hear him. Some people can. No one knows why as of now. That's crazy stuff.
Yeah, and there's the big asterisk, I think, that when we go into this, that we have to remember that at the end we learn that Crystal's an alien. So does that mean no humans? It adds a lot of things in my mind, because if aliens can understand Scooby, does that mean A, Shaggy's an alien, B, Scooby's an alien, and just can Shaggy's special human? Or C, is it just like Shaggy and aliens can understand Scooby and no one else because of the bond of Scooby and Shaggy? There's a lot up there, but before we go into the nitty gritty of that, Kaylee, does Scooby-Doo know that he's a dog in this movie, do you think?
I think in this movie, I'm going to say he knows he's a dog. Okay. First, he has this romance with the dog Amber, I believe is that the dog's name, and then there's two parts to this. Does he know he's a dog, and is he aware that he's a talking dog? Like, that's different than other dogs.
True.
Which I think he knows that he is a dog. I don't think he fully grasps that not everyone can hear him talking, and that he can speak English. Yeah. Because the moment when Amber the dog speaks, and then Shaggy's like, whoa, a talking dog, Scooby also goes, yeah, a talking dog. And Scooby's also shaken that there's a dog speaking. But I don't know if that's because Scooby doesn't know that he also is a talking dog, or if he doesn't know that they're the same thing. It's very confusing. But I'm gonna say he knows he's a dog.
I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to disagree with you. And I know Tim doesn't want to give any specific yes or no's to this. We'll see. We'll see what he brings. But I'm going to say that I have a new theory based on this movie, that not only does Scooby-Doo not know he's a dog, but he doesn't know he's a dog because he is not a dog. And seeing him...
Sorry. I don't mean to go on. Yeah.
I froze. What did you hear up to?
No, we all heard. Yeah, we heard you.
I'm just laughing at you.
No, my thing froze and then I popped back.
Okay.
I think after seeing Scooby next to another dog who's animated like a normal dog that we see, it made me recognize a lot of the personification of elements on Scooby-Doo just as a cartoon dog. His eyes, his ears, the way his body maneuvers. He can become a rattlesnake impersonator. Weird shit like that. But that makes me less question the animation style and more question if it's on purpose or not. And I have to say it is. And maybe that dog looks so much like a human dog because it's actually an alien and they've been studying humans and dogs. But I could go out on a limb and say that Scooby is in fact some hybrid, not a dog. Maybe he's a wolf of some kind. I don't know. But I think based on this, that he can't be just a normal dog. Tim, do you think that any of this is purposeful?
What is purposeful, you know?
Well, if you're working on
I know, but
Scooby-Doo and
like,
the Alien Invaders,
there's so
do you
much
think
in my life. There's so much in my life that I don't know if I choose it or not. Well, okay. I do think you bring up a good point. I do think that I had a similar moment when the Amber and Crystal were introduced first that I said, wow, those look like people. I haven't seen one of those this whole movie because everyone else just looks like this amorphous blob of character design. Whereas Amber and Crystal look like, oh, this like middle school prodigy has drawn a girl and a dog. And it's like, okay, well, that's a girl and a dog. That's what that is. And then next to each other, all the scenes with Amber and Scooby, first of all, just gave me a weird aura. I don't know. I think you've pinpointed exactly why I felt weird as this overly cartoonish dog next to this obviously very realistic dog. And I want to posit a second parallel theory to your thing that he's not in fact a dog, but he's maybe some sort of other being, alien or whatever. I think maybe you could say, because to resolve the idea that, you know, why is Shaggy able to talk with his dog? And why is that a trait shared with this random alien? Maybe go back to one of the original theories saying he is on drugs and extrapolate that and say there is some sort of higher mental plane, shared cultural consciousness that when you get to that place, whether that be through weed or alienship, both of those are in the shared common consciousness that Scooby inhabits, which I think that's somewhat convincing to me. That's sort of a Jungian perspective there, which might be a bit off-putting, but I think it's kind of funny. So I think I do agree. You raise a good point about how weird Amber and Scooby are together.
Yeah, I wonder what's in the Scooby snacks. But we also get, just to add to yours, we do get that at least once in the movie, Crystal and Shaggy are referred to as hippies, and there is that music montage of him simping for her. Yeah, it's a great song, and it'll probably be the intro I'll put it in. But it also confirms that Shaggy is obsessed with the 60s to a point where it's like a video that you'd see online. This man still lives in the 60s, and he's wearing all the 60s clothes. He clearly must attribute some other things from the 60s that obviously we wouldn't see or hear from. And being in Roswell, a common setting for aliens, I think it lends way easy to say, you know, of course Shaggy would be kidnapped, even though we know it's fake, because clearly he's on drugs and wakes up in the middle of the desert to two aliens staying on top of him. None of this seems like coincidence to me, that Shaggy, I think it is positive. If we drug tested Shaggy at any point, I think it would be positive.
Yeah.
Kalle, just to put a ribbon on, if Scooby-Doo knows he's a dog in this movie, did seeing Scooby talk more, or maybe the recognition that the gang cannot understand Scooby, does that posit anything new in your mind that maybe we didn't recognize?
This movie is so interesting because it does something with Scooby and his interaction with everyone else that no other movie has really done, which is what we just talked about. But that's also why I think in this movie he knows he's a dog, because no one else can hear him talking, so he has to know that he's not a person like the rest of them. So I think that has to at least somewhat put this idea in his mind that he is a different sort of creature than everyone else. I don't know. This movie is the whole thing with the aliens, and then I don't know. It hurts my brain to think about it.
It's a fast-paced movie. It's only an hour 15, so it's on the shorter side, definitely for a kids movie, relatively normal to where that would be. But the scenes are very fast-paced. In the first 10 to 15 minutes, they throw out all the plot for you. They know what's going to happen. You're aware, they're in a town and everyone in the town thinks that aliens exist, basically. And you have, your usual suspects. There's a mechanic who's you don't know what he's up to. There's Lester, who's the conspiracy theorist. You have a lot of people, and then you meet Crystal, but they throw it out there all really quick that I think, as we've talked before, the mystery element that's needed to make a good Scooby-Doo movie great is there. That there's this mystery not only of, are aliens real, but there's the mystery of what the hell is the government doing? What are they actually doing here? And this made me wonder, is this a pro or anti-government movie? Because the start would make you think that the town is clearly suspicious of the government being there. And they're clearly anti-government. And the Scooby Gang is kind of pro-government in a way based on the end. But there's that idea that the three people who are working for the government, who basically, I guess, betray the government, and that's why they're arrested at the end, they are, I guess, arrested because they're mining gold on government property. That's the only reason I can see. I found myself sympathizing for these villains that we're supposed to hate because they found gold and no one else was going to find it. Tim, do you think that this movie would be pro or anti-government overall? I don't know how else to word it.
Another good question. Another very good. Oh, first, just before I forget, I wanted to put a ribbon on your ribbon from the Scooby conversation for does he know he's a dog? Because if I was watching this and someone didn't mention this, I as an angry commenter would say, why didn't you talk about this line? Because there's an very offhanded, very clearly ironic joke line where Fred says after Amber talks, Shaggy's like, look, Scooby, a talking dog. And Scooby says, a talking dog. And Fred says, rolling his eyes, imagine that. Because we know that's a clue into the viewer. I think you can probably dismiss that as that's too good an opportunity to not make a joke about talking dog, Scooby-Doo, laugh. So I don't know. I think I'm just going to dismiss that as evidence, as that was sacrifice for the narrative and sake of a good joke. That's me. That's my personal opinion. Sorry, I dropped my pen. But yeah, on your question for government, because that's an intriguing question. Because at the end, you do see basically cut and dry that, yes, the government, this is good. We see an act identified as good, as the bad guys, who we've now identified as bad guys, are now being sent away. And look at how, Lester has pictures and, they're so happy. They're like, we're going to be free. And then they're like, haha, no, you won't. You're an idiot. Those are paintings. We are supposed to feel bad we're supposed to hate them. And, and the person doing the thing that's hurting them is the government, which is a good thing. I'm saying a lot of words just to say, I don't want it to be right, but I think it is, even if just in a status quo centrist way, it's pro-government, because it's directly collaborating with police. We get a strong zoom in shot of Fred Jones shaking the hand of a police member. How do we interpret that other than, yes, government? How do we interpret that? I don't want to interpret it that way, because traditionally the archetype of a hippie from the 60s and the archetype of a cop from the 60s do not get along, and they're sort of a free roaming hippie-ish band. I personally think this could be chalked up to some sort of cartoon revisionism or some other evil like that. But yeah, I think it's pro-government, especially because it's interesting, because they do a very strange 180 where at the beginning it sort of starts out as like somewhat anti-government, with like the MPs are the people, the scary people who are guarding this thing, and like that would be just as scary if it was real MPs. Like the movie doesn't say that they're scary because they're fake. They're just scary because it's government people who are keeping people out of their own town and not giving them answers. That would be scary, government or not. So at the beginning it's kind of mixed. It's kind of, it's a middle of the road, but by the end it's, bad guy is non-government, good guy is government. I think my end answer. I'm saying a lot here, but this is such a good question. I think it's pro-government in the end. It could have been not pro-government.
I would have to agree with that. I think I would make all the same points that you just made, and the fact that the MPs were fake MPs, and that was like a bad thing. Like, how dare you have these fake cops? There are real cops who are going to arrest you now for having these fake cops. That's very pro-government of them to be like, you shall not impersonate these military police officers, and now you are going to jail. So I would have to agree that it is a pro-government movie, unfortunately.
I found myself saddened that our three villains, who have a job that it's been admitted by them and the townspeople is almost useless, that their job is to find and hopefully communicate with alien life forms, which I have to give the government in this movie props. They do it. They've done it. They have sent out signals and they have found aliens. They've accomplished their goal. They'll never know it, but they've accomplished it. The three people who are working here are doing nothing all day. They're sitting there doing absolutely nothing. They one day find gold, and then they're like, oh shit, this gold can't even be ours. I'm getting paid there. I bet they're getting paid under, if not minimum wage, which can't be much. They're grown adults getting paid minimum wage. And they find gold. They're like, I want a helicopter. I want the gold. And they can't even get that. So it's a good plan. I could see a rational person doing this plan and getting away with it. Now, the alien setup, a bit odd. I wouldn't go that far. But I was, as you say, Tim, cartoon revisionist history. I was thinking to myself, as a kid, I would never question this. But as an adult, I'm questioning, why are we arresting these free thinkers? These people who saw an opportunity for gold. And they would have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling kids and their dog too. Yeah, we get it. I wanted to address the pacing of the movie as well. Because it's so fast-paced, there's about 3 montage kind of action scenes. Tim, did anything strike you? You said it was entertaining. What specifically, either about the humor or the pacing, and you can go into whatever you think would be most interesting to you throughout the movie, that made you just say, wow, this is actually really good? And take your time, you're good.
Oh yeah. I'm going to leisurely stroll through my notes here. I did enjoy, I said at the beginning, and I want to reiterate, the reoccurring jackalope bit is so funny to me. And maybe it's because I've been rotting in my house for the last 6 months in this prison, and I just think anything is funny if you just present it to me in a lighthearted way. But it just reoccurring, that was consistent. That was always delivered from the first scene to the end scene. You see a jackalope. That's funny. I don't know. But yes, I do think the fast pace kind of actually worked to their benefit, because in a way that's sort of more reminiscent of the modern jump cut style, where like YouTube videos are condensed down to like 10, 15 minutes. I mean, not this one, but it's still a good video, guys. Like and subscribe. Basically, I just think that they had a lot of good bits where they do a good job with expectations. I think expectations is a common thing with this movie in their bits. It's an alien movie, you know that from the get-go. From the intro is this crazy 3D animation of planets, and you zoom in, it's like, why is there a jackalope here? Is the jackalope related? And then immediately, no, it's not related. The a good definition of humor, a broad definition, is something like, you're underlying expectations into something that is humorous, and then it's like you don't expect it, so it's a subversion of expectations. And then you have Shaggy and Scooby are so in love they don't even want to eat anymore. What? They're not hungry? How? They stomach so big. So instead of they stomach so big, they stomach so small because of their stomach filled with love, which is funny. That's strange too, because it does a good job subverting the character tropes. And I do want to backpedal a little back on when I said I didn't watch in the pre-show. I did say I didn't watch anything else. I just watched this one. I watched a few clips from Cyber Chase because that is one that I just watched a ton of and had a ton of nostalgia for. And it's reminiscent of, I'll use that as an example from Cyber Chase. There's a one scene where I think they're gonna, Fred says, let's split up. And then Scooby and Shaggy look at each other and then just walk away. And Fred's like, wait, how are we going to split up? And they're like, well, we do the same thing every time. It's funny because, you know, and that's the same level. What else happens? The Amber bits I thought were kind of funny with the dog. Like, oh, she doesn't like him. But then it quit, as you said, breakneck pace. Suddenly in like 20 minutes, now the dog is in love with him. Why? I don't know. It's kind of weirded me out that was that quick to me. What else I thought was funny? I thought a lot of stuff was funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can jump in. There were two things you just mentioned were really intriguing me. And Kaylee, I want to know, because I think the midsection of these movies, around the 30-minute to the 50-minute mark, is really where these movies are either entertaining or you're bored and you're tuning out. Because those first 20, 30 minutes, if they hook you, they've got you. And then the middle section tends to be where we kind of know what's going to happen. Maybe a bit of the plot gets a little slower because we know a clue's coming up or something like that. But Kaylee, is there something that you think about this middle section of the film after the music montage and we meet Crystal, and maybe before Crystal reveals she's an alien and after Crystal says she's a government agent, which technically is not a lie? Do you think there's something maybe even about the split up, which Tim was talking about, which there's a very clear split up. Now we have two different lines of stories going through and they both converge, but those two different lines of story are the things keeping us afloat. What do you think worked, Kaylee, in this midsection?
Well, I think since this is from the era of Scooby that you and I, Ben, have talked about that we loved the most as kids, which is like the Witches Ghost, Cyber Chase, this era of Scooby. And I think this movie does the same exact thing that era of movies does, where you have the whodunit mystery part, but there's also this twist where like there's actual real supernatural stuff going on, but it's not what you think is happening. They like just completely redirect. They solve the real mystery, but then there's something else happening underneath, like another level of mystery. And I think that's what makes just this whole, not even just the middle part of this movie, but just the whole movie really interesting, because you think you're trying to figure out who is behind this weird government stuff and what's actually happening. Are the aliens real? And then you find out that the aliens that you thought were aliens aren't real, but then the people you didn't know were aliens, they're the real ones. And so I think that just makes the movie as a whole interesting. Even the middle part where you don't know who the aliens are yet and you're still figuring it out. I think the fact that you don't know yet and you're trying to figure out is what makes it interesting and entertaining to watch.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily 100% come out of left field, but I think the two twists definitely help the buildup overall, because it helps the story know where it's heading, not just once, but twice, so that the buildup can actually be more fun because they know, like, wait, we're going to get you. So that definitely helps it. Something else Tim mentioned that I was a little perplexed by during the film was Shaggy immediately simps for Crystal. He's, in love. He's like, I love this girl. She's my dream girl. And Scooby, simps because he's a dog or not a dog or whatever he is. He's Shaggy's companion, so he's going to do what Shaggy does. I get it. But for a while, it feels like Shaggy and Scooby are being used to me. So Shaggy and Scooby believe she's now a government agent, and they do whatever she says to help her, to hopefully court her. And she totally abuses their trust to lead them into clearly dangerous situations. And then at the end, we even get this idea of when they're leaving as aliens that Shaggy says, well, the whole time he's like, do you have a boyfriend? And then at the end, the alien version of Crystal is like, I'm looking for someone, but long distance doesn't really work. So she is actually looking for a boyfriend, which made the whole thing weird to me. Do you think Tim, do you think there was real potential of love? Is this real? Do you think connection? Or do you think that the aliens were using Shaggy and Scooby?
That's another good question. This is something I didn't even really consider on my first watch. I obviously I picked up on the simping smell in the room when those scenes were going on. I do think upon reflection, I do think, there's some amount of they are using them for material gain. However, I think it's not impossible that there's some amount of real affection there. obviously kids movie, so the implication is that romance is real. That's a good question though, because beyond like they obviously Crystal and Amber obviously have motivations to act in a way that would not only be normal for humans, but also in a way that would get other people to do what they want. And I think you can most blatantly see this in the scene towards the end when Shaggy and Scooby are doing their, I don't know how to describe it, their macho men stuff when they just go like, I'm not going to reenact it. However, they do some karate chop poses, and then the aliens turn into their alien form and scare off the fake MPs. And then in that moment, right after that, they immediately shower Scooby and Shaggy with praise, saying, "Oh, you scared them off. It's so cool." And then they both give them like a kiss or something. I don't remember. And then that stuck out to me because it was so blatant to me that I'm like, oh, they are really just manipulating this simp action, I guess you could term it. So yeah, there's some amount of manipulation, which does make me question. I didn't even consider that element. That is strange. Yeah, I think you've hit on you felt the pulse. You're in the
It
right.
took me for a turn. And
That's strange.
a great philosopher once said, "I want to know what love is." Do you think that this is? I mean, it's clearly one-sided love at first. Do you think it's appropriate, and do you think that it could have worked at all ever? Because Shaggy, I think even if she's an alien, would have been like, "I'm down."
I mean, as Crystal says, long distance relationships never work. So unless they were planning to stay on Earth, I don't think it was gonna ever work out.
By long distance, she meant off Earth and on Earth.
Mhm.
So yeah, I see how that could not. I don't think that would strengthen a relationship if your partner is an astronaut and they're on the moon for 6 months. I think that would make things a little tough. And that alone, I think, has to confirm a bit of what Tim was saying, that could be some romance, but overall it's probably okay. I guess we'll use you to help us. Fine, we'll do it. I guess if we have to. I'm a secret government agent, Men in Black style, on another planet. Okay, I'll do it. Another thing that this movie hits, I think, really well is it has the 60s vibe. And the music, something that we've talked about in other Scooby movies, there's a few action scenes that use these songs that are more pop heavy and more groovy based. Tim did something about the sound effects or the music, the way this movie was composed, because those action scenes and those montages are clear in every Scooby movie, but for some reason, they're always entirely based around the music. A good action scene in Scooby-Doo has nothing to do with what's going on screen. It has everything to do with what the music is. Why do you think we would either like this music or dislike it? What about it works or doesn't?
I'll even take her shopping. That's the depth of my devotion. I don't know. I do think that it's pretty it starts off really strong. The first like 30 seconds of groovy are groovy. They are very good. They are playing in my head as we speak, and they have echoed in my mind for months. But I do think that you've definitely said, you're spitting some facts when you're talking about how the song really plays the movie. When there is any kind of montage, the song is tantamount. You're not really looking at that. And I think looking at this movie through that lens, talking about the songs, I do think they do a good job of conveying the emotion. But I don't know, the latter half of Groovy, and especially the aliens are here, are kind of weak to me. When I was watching, I'm like, okay, I don't really need to look at this anymore. Especially on first viewing, I'm like, I don't know what aliens are here adds to at all, other than an excuse to do a cute little chase, which the chase was cute. So I will give them that. I don't know. I don't think the music is very strong here. I think its strengths really do lie in the other elements. But yeah, it's pretty good. They did a good job with the first 10 seconds of Groovy, so whatever.
Yeah, there's the one chase scene where they're running through the different mines and the two groups. You have Shaggy and Scooby's group, and then Daphne, Velma, and Fred's group. They are all running around. It reminded me of, there's a great scene, one of my favorites. There's a Johnny Bravo crossover with Scooby-Doo where they're running into different rooms and opening and closing doors. And it reminded me of that. And that's the only reason I liked it. But Kaylee, do you think anything about the music? Do you agree with Tim's assessment that the first 10 seconds of Groovy have you so hooked that you're like, okay, the music in this movie is great? Or do you think the rest of the music is just as top notch?
Well, I think the whole Groovy song is amazing. I'm gonna say even beyond the first 10 seconds. I think just the idea that Shaggy is singing a love song in the middle of this movie is incredible. Very enjoyable. Just because I thought it was funny. Like the first 10 seconds of the song are obviously better than the latter half, but I still think just the whole song and the whole idea of this like imaginary montage of how Shaggy pictures his life with Crystal, Shaggy, or Scooby, and Amber is hilarious. So I thought that added a lot to the movie. I really enjoyed that song. I think, as usual, the music in the Scooby movies is usually pretty good, and I didn't really see any problems with the music in this one. Thought it was all pretty good.
Just like music in every Scooby movie, a lot of them have these little motifs. And as Tim started talking about with the jackalope, this movie has a lot of motifs throughout. A lot of weird things that maybe don't add to the plot, but are just nice to see. The jackalope at the beginning and throughout, I'm not going to psychoanalyze if it represents anything. But there's also the mechanic who is at first mean, and then we find out that he collects pressed flowers and that he is mean on the outside because he says that if you're soft, people will step all over you. And they all go, yeah. And there's also this kind of existentially depressing shot of Scooby and Shaggy staring into the night sky. And from the first, as Tim said, the 3D animated intro, there's this idea of looking out into the great beyond that is a little depressing, but also just emotional overall. It stirs up, for some reason, it stirs up a lot. As Crystal leaves, she says something along the lines of, we had a great time, we had a great adventure and made great friends. And that is like a high school senior yearbook quote. But for some reason, it hit me. Tim, with all of these motifs, is there one or a few that made you think about it more than you would as a kid? And do you think any of them represent anything for the movie? Why are they here?
This is a perfect segue. You couldn't have planned this better to my theory for the film. It seems mandatory at this point for everyone to have a little pet fan theory about each film. So I've taken the liberty of doing some research, and I have, yes, the answer is a hearty and strong yes from me to you, Ben Kessler, that yes, I do think there is a common theme, which is I would fly right over my head as a kid. And I might be looking a bit too deep into this, but throughout the film, I see many instances of the motif of like fear and like dangerous or high adrenaline encounters leading to a bad memory or a bad recollection. It's like the eyewitness, how eyewitnesses are really notoriously bad if you actually look into accounts of how your memory is stored, how that's really bad, especially under high intense pressure situations. It's similar to the, I think it's the like weapon tunnel vision effect or something like that, something along those lines, where when you're in a hostage or dangerous situation, your mind focuses on one thing, or your mind gets severe details wrong. And I think from the very beginning, very beginning, I have like 4 instances where this happens. One of which is, well, you'll see. But the first one is at the very beginning of the film when, Shaggy is driving the mystery machine, and what we later know to be the actual UFO, which is Crystal's and Amber's, it flies overhead, and the gang is like, was that a jet? Like, what was that? And on first blush, that you could say that's merely they didn't get a good look at it. It's dark at night. But, we see it very clearly animated as a giant glowing UFO that no one could mistake as like a jet. This thing is huge. It's like 4 times the size of any jet. It's got a million lights on it. And however, if you were driving in the middle of this Mojave Desert or esque situation, you would be like kind of in a weird spot. You'd be like, I don't expect to see anything up there. Nothing should be up there. What is that? That's a scary situation. Am I about to be bombed by the US government's type of beat? So, that would scramble your brain a little bit. And that's the first one. The second one is shortly after when Scooby and Shaggy finish their classic chase and they end up in the diner in the first night. They recount the aliens as having, at the beginning they start doing it pretty well. They say, you know, they were slimy, they were green, whatever. Well, no, they were green, they were large, they were 8 foot, whatever. Green and 8 foot. You know, those both are representative of what we've seen. But they also call them slimy and glowing. I don't know if you guys like saw the same movie. They were not either of those things. And maybe slimy is hard to get a sense of, especially with a simple animation style, but they were definitely not glowing. We would see that. They would glow. And I think that's another thing. That's another instance where these people were literally just in a chase. They were in a high intensity situation. They're not going to remember all the details correctly. They're going to get something wrong. And there's another one where in the song itself, and this is one of the redeeming factors about it to me, is that it supports my personal theory. The aliens are here. The whole thing is this long, like, diatribe about how scary these things are, how they'll kill you, or they're like if they catch you, you better say toodaloo, dude. Like all of which is we know to be ungrounded. It's just there's no lore around these aliens either. It's not like, you know, vampires where it's like they'll suck your blood and it's like that's a concrete threat. It's just they are scary and we have no idea. And this whole chase and song represents that kind of vacuous fear of like how are we getting all of these ideas about the aliens? I don't know. It's just because they're really scary and we don't like that. And I think those 3 instances are the strongest instances of that motif, of this reoccurring thing of like none of this is supported by what your eyewitness is seeing. This is just something constructed after the fact in their mind. Fear is altering their memory. There's a number of case studies, most of which were done around the early 80s, on how much holding a weapon in different contexts affects your memory. Like if you saw a man with a gun in a tennis court, says by, I think it's like Loftus and et al. In 85 or something, then that's going to stick out to you. Gun in a tennis court, that sticks out. Gun in a gun range, your memory won't track that as something abnormal or scary because it's in context. So in the same way, when something is out of context, your brain isn't going to remember. I'm going off because this is my theory. Yeah, that's that short answer. I do think the motif of fear and memory, of this, you not being able to correctly recount details of something, show up often and would never show up in my head as a kid. I would never have thought to think about that. That is my motif.
Yeah, and there are a lot of studies too about near-death experiences and how that affects someone's, not just their memory, but the way they live the rest of their life. And I think Shaggy and Scooby-Doo, while it's a cartoon level, they have many near-death experiences, and none of them seem to affect them at all. But this one, you can tell that it affects the way they act clearly around people that they love, because at some points they're exaggerating the size of the jackalope for it to clearly make themselves seem more masculine, or like, oh, we fought this jackalope. But at other times, they just have memories. And we see it with Lester too, who we don't know if he was ever, actually invaded by the aliens, but he could have been by the fake aliens. And then we know that his pictures are paintings, and that the details in his paintings, I don't know if you pause and you look very close, a lot of them don't resemble what we actually see with the UFOs and things of that nature. So it really, I think you're onto something, that there's this idea of fear and memory. Kalle, is there anything you think, maybe not as in depth, but with any motif throughout, that you think lends way to what I felt was a very emotional ending?
This was a lot of information just thrown at me. This is a lot to think about. This is a lot to process. I love it when our guests bring in well thought out and notes and theories.
Do you have stories on cat gods and goddesses? No?
Right. That.
I don't know what you're talking about, frankly.
Because I don't know, when I'm watching these, I am not analyzing or thinking deeply or having any sort of coherent, intelligent thoughts about any Scooby media ever. So when people bring stuff in like this, I have to think about it. It makes perfect sense the way you explained it, Tim. I don't have anything to add because my brain cells don't work like that. I just watch and go, haha, Scooby, ruh-roh. That's it. Nothing's happening up here.
I think too, it can provide some answers to my biggest thing watching this is Scooby and Shaggy are very bummed out that their potential girlfriends have left this planet, which is a weird thing to say. But immediately when they see the Scooby snacks, they're hopping right back in. They almost mutilate Velma, who is seen at the end with her glasses and hair all shook up, and she looks like she just was at a ringside fight and got punched in the face. But they jump so quick, and I don't think it's that they have a short memory. I think it's that their coping skills and their ability to take in all of the adventures and the journeys that they've been on and to say, these are things we've done. It does not define who I am. I think that's a great character point that we can learn from Shaggy and Scooby-Doo, that no matter what they do or no matter what their slip-ups are, as we see they have many issues, as Tim kind of pointed out, that being in an experience like this does give issues of believability too, that no one ever believes Shaggy or Scooby in these movies at the beginning. But that we just see from their characters that even though they might not be the bravest, they are clearly the best at being able to take a situation, understand and reflect and move on and not forget it, but just take it in and say, this is something I did. This is my life. This is how I felt, and continue moving on, maybe eat a sandwich. That really seems to calm the nerves down. Kaylee, do you have something to add?
I think just going back to this whole, what we're just talking about, I think there's a part in the song Groovy where Shaggy, he's like, even when I'm chasing the ghosts or whatever, I'll still be home for dinner. So this establishes this idea that Shaggy, if in the situation in life where he has a reason to not be chasing these ghosts, he has someone else who's important to him, he would not be doing this. He would leave his friends behind and duck out of there like it was nothing, which I think is really interesting. And it's basically just saying, like, Shaggy's there to do this now, but I mean, if something better comes along, he's out.
I don't know if it's something better. I think it's settling down in some aspects. And two, there's the funny moment where even the ghost stops and they kind of look at him and they're like, what? Because he's not the person that we all think he is in that montage, Shaggy does display a compassion for wanting a normal life, which I think is admirable. Tim, did you want to add anything to our commentary on your theory?
I always appreciate being told that I've put too much effort into something. That always helps because that makes me feel like I did the right thing. I do like that. I do think you bring up some interesting stuff. Definitely about that's another thing I wish I remembered to bring up when you asked me what I thought was funny. I really liked the moment of the ghost, like also standing on the porch, staring wistfully at Shaggy drive away in his van, because the joke of that scene is it's a regular 9 to 5 job. The ghost's in on it too. Like that. And now he's leaving early, and everyone's like, "Wait, where are you going?" Even the ghost. That's funny. That's a funny scene. I liked it. I lolled again, and I do agree with that. I just wanted to also bring up that I thought, and maybe it's possible that a sibling of mine also would feel very upset if I did not mention that Lester's paintings are truly beautiful. I did looking at them. I just wanted to bring that up because you reminded me when you were talking about Lester's another point of his inability to correctly recount the ship, whether it was the real one or the fake one. He didn't really give a good account of either in his paintings, but those paintings did give a good account of how amazing of a landscape, what a good sense of like scale, what a grand sense of like the beauty of space. Like it's amazing paintings. And I as a side note, I just wanted to throw in that the art directors must have just had gone to town on this one. They must have had a great time because put so much effort into this random film. Yeah, I do think that there, as you mentioned, the one about Lester too is a strong point. I think I was supposed to bring him up, but I forgot in my theory of, yeah, he also has some issues of recounting things. To be fair, this is another good opportunity to bring up I have a note listed here that is labeled simply implied anal. Or no, it's listed anal implication. And that is the scene where they're talking to Lester in the diner, and suddenly he's talking about what they did to him when the aliens abducted him, and we never really get resolved. It's kind of implied that the real aliens are good guys and would never, like, abduct anyone. So it's probably the the South people, but the South people, he's talking about his experience in the abduction, and then he says, and that's not all. Then they cut to us. Now the camera's outside the window, and then Lester makes some wild motions, and he goes like, and the gang goes like, and then what is that moment supposed to mean to me, other than they stuck something up his rectum? I don't know. I think that's clear. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, there's.
I guess it's an adult joke. Still, why?
Yeah, you should have changed that from anal implication to probing, I think is an apt word. But yeah, there's more adult humor in this movie, similar to the live action ones that we've seen, than there is in other animated movies, just because of, Shaggy Jr. looks just like Shaggy, things like this. Who's the real mother? I don't know. But in a lot of situations in this movie where there's just some jokes that might just go slightly, this one goes way over a kid's head, but slightly, they take the opportunity to actually do that, which I enjoyed and I have to agree with. And I think, speaking of adult humor, this is the perfect time to ask a staple question we have. That is this a good date movie? If you were watching this movie on a date, would you choose this movie? If your partner chose this movie, would you go on another date with them? Kalle, do you want to start? And then I'll go, and then we can have Tim give his, either if he agrees or disagrees with us.
I would love to go first on this one. So I have gone on record to say that every Scooby movie has the potential to be a good date movie. I will also go on record to say that out of all of the ones we've watched so far, and I think out of the ones that we will watch through the end of this podcast, this may be the best Scooby movie to watch on a date, because it has probably the most romantic elements of any Scooby movie we're going to watch. It's also very funny. It's entertaining. There's intrigue, which I talked about before. It's a good element for a date movie. If this was going to be a first date movie, I think it's a casual viewing experience, and there's a little bit of romance. I would go on a second date with someone if they picked this movie on the first date. And I also think, because I've always made this question into two parts before, if it's a good first date movie and then a later on date movie, and I think it's good for both. And I think out of all the Scooby movies, either live action movie or this one would be the best first date or any date movie to watch if you're going to watch Scooby.
Great minds think alike, and I'll up you. I think this is tied for what I would believe is the number one best date movie for Scooby-Doo, because it has that intrigue like you're talking about. It has the emotional. It has slight breaks where there's music and montage, and there are things to make fun of. Lester, the mechanic, the government. You can get into these weird, deep talks that you might not think are going to happen. And for me, it's tied with the first live action movie as the two best date movies. And if I'm going on a first date and someone chose this to watch and they haven't researched me and watched this, and they haven't stalked me online, and they choose just out of their own accord to play this movie, I think I'm going to marry that person. And I don't know, maybe I'm Shaggy, but geez, yeah. I think I have to go with that. Tim, is this a good date movie? We're very high on it. Are you?
All right. Now let me be clear. I want to be very clear up front. I've never been on a date. I don't intend to be on a date. I've never had a girlfriend. In fact, I've never had any romantic interaction in my entire life. I want that I want that to be expressly clear within. In fact, could you put this clip at the beginning of the podcast? I want everyone to know before I watch
maybe
that
a podcast listener, maybe
that
a podcast listener can give you your first date.
No, in fact, I plan to never have any romantic interaction. That is the current plan. So I think that on its own merit disqualifies me from answering this question, but I will attempt to give you one out of respect for you and the show and for the respect of Scooby-Doo. I do think that in some crazy oddball scenario, hypothetical, where I am on a date and this movie is being played, yeah, I'd enjoy it, but my viewing of most media that involves any sort of romance is I'll ignore the romance part. I simply don't care for it. I simply will not watch it. I will censor it. I have the words romance muted on Twitter. I hate romance. So I don't really care for that part of the movie. It's amusing. I think they play it well. I do think if I was on a date, this movie would be a very solid choice for the reasons Kalle listed, especially. Well, those were pretty convincing. It does have a good. Its pacing is good, where you do have opportunities to sit and talk about what just happened, and that, as you said, could lead to even more big discussions about, what is the idea of government moral. It could lead to that, which is always great on a first date. But I do think that if this was a first date movie, it could do what it's accomplished. It does. I think it's very strong. That being said, I am strictly against romance.
I like how in this hypothetical, it's a larger hypothetical that you'll be on a date than it is that you'll be watching the Scooby-Doo movie. And that's a first. And I really just enjoy that thought. I think this is a great point where we can start giving our rankings. We have a nostalgia ranking out of 10 Scooby snacks and a current day ranking. And I'll go first and then Kalle, and then Tim, you'll get the last word in. And if there's anything else you want to add. And my nostalgia ranking was I remembered Groovy a lot as a kid. And I didn't remember the end as much. I remember the beginning more so than anything, which was weird to me. But I think my nostalgia ranking is going to be an 8 out of 10. And as I said at the start, and I'll say it again here, this is a 10 out of 10. It held up the best for me personally. I would watch this if not for the podcast, just on my own. Obviously, I'm doing a Scooby-Doo podcast, so I'm a bit biased on that. But I think if you're going to watch a Scooby-Doo movie, and there's a list, we have to make a list, Kalle, of a viewer's guide to Scooby-Doo, that this movie is great for new viewers. It's great for old viewers. It's great. It just holds up. It's a 2000 movie, so it has a bit of that grainier kind of early 2000s, late 90s animation style. It's kind of creepy for a kid, but they add in this element where you see, if you're a young kid maybe, where you see the monster alien early. So it keeps this idea going, a lot of monster movies like not having you see the monster for a while, which keeps up the suspense. So for a kid, if you're a small kid or if you're a parent watching this, hello to the parents out there, maybe you can show this to your kid. And I think it's less scary because you see the alien or the monster early on. I don't remember being scared by it saying that, but it just works on every level when it comes to that, because it has a bit of the, if not creepy or scary, it just has a bit of that aesthetic around it. And for me, I really appreciated that.
For me, yeah. So for my nostalgia ranking, I'm gonna say 7 out of 10, because I remember watching it, I remember enjoying it, but I always liked like Cyber Chase and The Witch's Ghost more. Like, this was never like my favorite one, but it was still good. So I'll give it a solid 7 out of 10. For my current day ranking, I know I have gone on record to say originally that Cyber Chase would be the only 10 out of 10. And then I said that the second live action beat Cyber Chase on my recent viewing. And that is the only 10 out of 10. So I cannot give this a perfect 10 out of 10 because I refuse to say that this is as good as Cyber Chase or Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed. So I'll give it a 9.1. It's above a 9, but it's not a 10. 9.1 Scooby Snacks out of 10.
And Tim, to finish off here, you can give it any decimal point you want, any weird qualifications. You can add an asterisk if you'd like. a nostalgia ranking and a current day ranking. Let's hear it.
Okay, so for nostalgia ranking, I will start with a 5.75 plus out of 10. So that's a very specific ranking. Basically, I barely remember this movie. Like as a kid, I only remembered the ending, kind of the inverse of your situation. I only remembered that those two girls or whatever were actually aliens. And like, whoa, I didn't even remember that Shaggy simped. I didn't care. I only remembered that fact. And I was kind of neutral to that fact. I didn't care about the movie. But that thing about them being aliens stuck in my mind. And it was a cool scene and they looked cool. And I think that influenced some of my duels as a kid. So I think that's the plus for me, because the impact that nostalgia had on me is kind of hard to gauge, but it definitely had some amount of, I liked that scene. I thought those women transforming into extraterrestrials was cool. I thought it was neat. So it had some indeterminate impact on me that was beyond just how much I liked it. But for my current day rating, I'm going to give what I think might be give me some backlash as a 7.05 out of 10. I had to deduct 2 points off the bat for the fact that it included some allusion to romance in the film, which simply I won't abide by. And the remaining 0.5 points I had to deduct were simply from, I know I've spent most of this episode kind of praising the breakneck speed of the movie, but honestly, it was a little bit, sometimes it worked to the disadvantage of the film. I think that deserves a 0.05 deduction, is that it could have lingered a little bit longer on certain scenes, especially at the beginning when things were happening, where immediately Scooby and Shaggy are being visited by Amber multiple times in like one day. And it's like, wait a minute, didn't they meet each other like 2 hours ago? And it's like, I don't know. It's a little fast for me. I'm a little bit of a slow poke when it comes to these things. So 7.05, I may be willing to have my mind changed on that in the future, but not today. That's my final rating for today.
It's still very solid. That's, higher than your nostalgic ranking, which I think ups it. And that, it's fair. It's a very fair ranking. I can't thank you enough for coming on, Tim. It's been a great talk. Kalle, let's hear the outro.
Tim, thank you so much for coming, but Rutrow, looks like we're all out of time. Stay tuned for our next episode. We will have Michael Vito Valentino on. So sorry we had to bump him today, but stay tuned for next time, and we'll see you next time on A Pod Named Scooby-Doo.
Ocean, I'd even help